Giving and accepting feedback is a critical skill set for any manager. I mean, all of us pretty much had bosses, so even when you're the CEO of a company, you have bosses and you have to be willing to accept feedback. And giving feedback is a requirement of any manager's job. You're responsible for grooming and enhancing the talent and mentoring the younger talent in a company. I think that's one of our primary responsibilities as managers. And in order to do that, you have to be really good at giving feedback in a way that it gets accepted and it gets acted upon. So this is a really short deck. It's only like 7 slides, but I just want to go over some of the key factors in giving and accepting feedback. So there are some key best practices. First, you need to be able to learn from feedback. One of my bosses once said to me, somewhere in even criticism, there's some honesty. Now, it may not be the honesty you want to hear, or even the way you view it, but you have to see the benefit of getting feedback because it's a way to improve and learn and get better. And he was absolutely right. It is a way to improve and learn and get better. But in order for it to have value, it has to have purpose. I mean, if you're just going to tell somebody you're not good at that, that doesn't have any purpose. It doesn't help the person to learn and it doesn't help the person to improve. So always make sure when you're giving feedback, it's not just criticism, it actually has some kind of mechanism that shows that there's a purpose to the feedback. It can't just be one-offs. One-offs usually, this is just giving somebody feedback once about something and then never talking about it again or never following up on it. One-offs have very little value because people have a hard time integrating them into the change process of their personalities. You really have to be consistent with feedback, and that's the only way you're going to really see actionable change in your employees. And make sure it can be changed. Not everything can be changed. If somebody said they don't like my height, that's not something I can readily change. So make sure whatever it is that you're going to provide feedback on is actually a quality or a skill that that particular employee can change. And don't speak for others. Don't give feedback that says, so and so said. That's not a good thing to do. Speak for yourself and let others speak for themselves. It's never a good idea to speak with somebody else's voice. There is a difference between feedback and criticism. Uh, Feedback actually has a mechanism for change, and criticism does not. It's not just what you say, it's also just as important how you say it. There is a right way and a wrong way to give feedback, a right way to get the results that you want. Feedback offers a way for improvement. It tells the listener, here's what can be improved and here's how you can improve it. Criticism has no method for improvement. It's either something that you can't improve, or it's a personality trait, or it's you're terrible at this, but it doesn't offer a mechanism on how you could be better and what you could do to improve. So remember, feedback offers a way to improve. Criticism is exactly that. It's just criticism. It has no vehicle for improvement. And then anytime you give feedback, it has to be measurable. It has to be something that you can, the change is something that we can measure. It has to be specific and it has to have a timeline associated with it. In 6 months and 3 months, people don't like very open ended feedback. They don't like you to say, well, you got to get better at this. If you're a little bit more specific with your feedback, I'd like to see this part of this skill improve by the time we do your next performance review in 3 months. It really gives somebody an actionable goal to go after. While I am a strong proponent for positive language, because I think you just get more results with positive language, truth is truth, so you can't sugarcoat it. I mean, there's a expected level of honesty in feedback. There's a good way to say it, and there's a bad way to say it, but there's definitely needs it, truth is truth, and you shouldn't try and make it look like something that it isn't. Personality traits don't belong in feedback. You really can't be talking about somebody's personality in feedback. That's not appropriate. It's just not what you should be doing. You should be focused on skill sets. Leave interpretation out of it. Be specific. Don't let somebody put their own spin or their own interpretation on what you have to say. If you're specific enough, they'll understand and they won't misinterpret the information that you're giving them. And follow up. You can't manage what you don't measure. So you have to be able to measure the results of the feedback that you're giving. Now, on the other side of the fence is the ability to accept feedback. It's one thing to give it, boy, it can sometimes be a very different thing to take it. And this is not an insult to anybody who comes from a critical family, but people who come from critical families where the parents were very critical or very demanding or very tough or not very willing to see things from a pinnacle perspective, there was always room for growth. Those families usually bring children into the business world who can be a little defensive because they're accustomed to being defensive. And so if you're one of those, and by the way, I happen to be one, I come from a critical family, and we're a great family, but we do always kind of criticize people. If you come from that type of an environment, it's something you have to overcome, and it's tough. It's really tough. It's tough to overcome your childhood. You have to learn to judge the goal of the feedback and not the person giving it. It's not the person giving it. It's the goal. The goal of the feedback is for you to improve and get better. You have to ask for feedback. If you're the type like me who can, I'm not that way anymore, but when I was younger, I was very defensive early on in my career. And one of my bosses said, if you would ask for feedback on a regular basis, you wouldn't be surprised when you get it. It would come in small doses. And I was thinking about that one day, and I said, he's absolutely right. If I ask for it, first off, I'll be in the right frame of mind to receive it. But second off, it will come in small enough doses that I can handle it and I won't feel as defensive. And he said, and try and keep an open mind, Deb, because it's really important to keep an open mind in these situations, because there's, this is for you and the company's betterment. And then if the feedback is harsh, try to refocus it so that it's positive. You're not a willing victim in the feedback process. You do have a right to try and help your boss if he's not very good at giving feedback to refocus. If he tells you that you need to improve on something, ask him, how can you give me some advice on how to do that? You don't have to just sit back and take it. You may be excellent at giving feedback, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your boss will be. Some bosses are just not good communicators and they have a hard time with this. And if you can get good at accepting feedback, then you can also help your boss to get good at giving it. You may have a boss that's really bad at it. He may feel uncomfortable or she may feel uncomfortable giving it, or they may be the type that just talk about not sugarcoating it. They just come right out and say it like it is and don't even make an attempt to make you feel good. That can be tough. That can be a tough situation to find yourself in. But again, you can help that process along. You don't have to, sit back and be a moderator. You can help by asking for clarification. Don't add your own insecurities to whatever you hear. This is a big one. People read into feedback their own insecurities. You really need to stop doing that. You need to focus on what's being said so that you can improve the skill and not feel insecure about what's being offered to you. If you're the type of person who can really be very honest about yourself, then you can start setting goals for your own improvement, not just what your boss sees, but also about what you know. If you're really honest about yourself, and it's hard to do that, but a lot of people can do very well with this. If you're very honest about yourself, you can see the things that you need to work on. And one of mine was my emails. It was like a big thing when I was first starting out. My emails were just horrible, to be candid with you. And one of my bosses said to me, your emails are they're like stream of consciousness reading. And I was like, wow, that's kind of harsh. And he said, yeah, it's like reading a novel. And he said, candidly, I don't come to work to read a novel. And I kind of went back and took a look at my emails, and I was like, now that I'm looking at him, I can see where he's coming from, and I can see that he doesn't have the time to read that every time I want to send him something. So, I sat down and I wrote out some specific goals for myself. 84% of business people tell us that they have no goals at all. This is just not good. This is like floating from thing to thing at work. And 13% said they do have goals, but they're not written down, so they didn't necessarily feel that they were totally committed to them. They were still in a little bit of flux. And 3% said that they had clear written goals and plans to accomplish them. You know, I don't know about you, but I think being in the 3% sounds an awful lot better than being in the other 87% or 97%.